Kirk Burrows, he's a legend that, Diddy groped him at a Diana Ross concert. You heard anything about that?
Kirk had told me.
With Diddy's trial
She is
kicking off,
Diana Ross. Reputation is going to suffer, therefore let us jump in and find out what's actually happening. Prior to all of this chaos, Diddy was entangled in a different dispute well before the former go-go dancer was knocked down by the feds. Audria Sherry, an adult celebrity, had said she had already brought him to court. Diddy made her do some really improper material at one of his notable freak-offs in 2004, basically, crazy parties where anything goes, featuring A-list visitors and no restrictions. They're not simply for their own malevolent, wicked desires, but in reality, this is Audria is also where things get particularly messy. Asserted that she only saw Diana at one of those gatherings. Ross was alongside Gone Deal and a few other celebrities backed supporting her assertions, and based on his asserts that it appears Diddy and Kirk and Diana were involved in a commercial transaction. He claims that you are acquainted with Diddy. Did anyone hear anything during a Diana Ross concert? Regarding that, Kirk informed me that Gene said that Diddy committed some naughty acts in Diana's performance was revealed when one of the co-founders of Bad, Kirk Burrows Diddy, according to Boy Records, was in. I assumed that you weren't at Diana's show. Fucking him, he said. No, Gene. He approached me and actually grabbed me tight, and he said, I owe you nothing. It's crazy since Diana's name and elegance have always been linked. Wonderful heritage, yet with all these eerie stories about Diddy are surfacing everywhere. People are beginning to give each other side-eye. Connected to him, including a legend such as Ms. Ross, and no one is currently ignorant of what transpired with Diddy's open parties. Drug abuse for the purpose of pimping and subsequently abusing them. The legal background of Diddy is nothing more than an embarrassment to. I told him, in the past, people used to believe that Diddy and Kirk Burrows were lovers. In light of Audria's allegations, during an interview, things became heated. Audria Sherry and Daily Mail are identical. Diddy was struck by a former go-go dancer with that case months before the federal government swooped in and revealed a lot about what truly collapsed at those alleged freak-offs. In her opinion, these weren't simply crazy gatherings. The feds genuinely in their indictment. They were described as forced to spend days with a man. Audria adds that there was a distinct space for this craziness stashed away apart from the primary gathering where the genuine convoluted events, which is where she claims to have seen well-known celebrities, including Diana Ross and her experiences. It was important to pay attention to their presence. Of course, adults, men, women, boys, and girls. Audria says Diddy says it gets worse. Not only did he plan these freak-offs, he was aggressively using her as a pimp to prominent visitors. She added, he attempted to interact intimately with male models. English reported those occurrences to the Daily Mail. I consented to do it since, well, I'm at a private event where Jay-Z was, Beyoncé, Diddy was, all the big names that I was unaware would turn into anything. According to English, she become a pawn in Combs' plan to influence powerful visitors by secretly documenting their interactions and using the video as leverage. I observed there, I saw Ja Rule and Busta Rhymes. Observed Diana Ross and her son Evan there, who was not yet of legal age when I saw Paris Hilton, and I continue to wonder, Reverend Al Sharpton, why she mentioned that Reverend Al Sharpton was present. Let's return to Diana Ross and her, though. Sean Diddy's bond with Diddy, a man who is at the top of the music industry, is now engulfed in an influx of litigation for a Houston-based lawyer. Recently, Tony Busby disclosed that his company, in addition to California's AVA law, more than 120 people have kept the group. People, each of whom stated that they had Diddy's essay "The Day Will Arrive When Will names other than Sean be mentioned?" Cones, there are numerous names for it. Challenging to comprehend, but certainly according to some, Diana Ross, the pinnacle of fashion and music, was saw at the now famous freak-off of Diddy. You are aware of the parties that were less celebrity gatherings and other events, complete and utter turmoil, drunkenness, unrestrained conduct, and an atmosphere that shouted, "Nothing but legal." However, this is where it truly stops. Arresting you, she allegedly brought Evan Ross, her young son, is attending the What If These Weren't Coachella? Following parties. These were said to anything X-rated goes for several days. Circumstances that the feds today characterize as using coerced sexual actions with men. Therefore, the notion that Evan is still an adolescent at the time being close to that insane behavior is simply unimaginable. Unsettling, and let's face it, Diddy's there had a reputation for gatherings that weren't low-key gathering places. They were somewhat free-for-all hedonistic games. You didn't accidentally run across one, you knew the situation you were entering, which raises the huge, awkward question, why would a mother, much less one like Diana Ross, takes her child to see their mom would use anyone to obtain going forward? That's simply who she is. For those who have been following Diana's career attentively, the first shock could dim a little bit. Since Loki is renowned for being a queen of high maintenance for years, energy has been used in the business. That diva persona is unbeatable and exquisite. And constantly within the inner ring of authority, she is the focal point of several of the most prestigious occasions. Therefore her attendance at Diddy's parties may not be the most outrageous. Dragging your son into that while stretching mess, which is a completely distinct type of controversy. You have to ask yourself what was circulating in her mind. What sort of a parent takes their minor child to a gathering that is well known for its wildness? And we're not referring to elegant Hollywood gatherings with elaborate orbs. These were the types of gatherings where things became out of control, full-on adult nudity disorder. But Diana Ross reportedly didn't perceive an issue with dragging her adolescent son. It causes you to pause in the midst of all that turmoil and inquire if she simply lacked knowledge or if she truly unconcerned. And the most bizarre aspect of her at these, son wasn't the only child. Extravagant gatherings. One of the greatest disturbing tales from Justin Leftoski. He had only turned 6 when he ended up attending a party hosted by Diddy. Can you picture what it was like back in 99-6? Justin recalls it all too vividly. He claimed that Diddy was unusually young, for a bit too near for the comfort arm in a strange way all around him, and he recalls 2 things that have stayed with him. The overpowering odor of marijuana and women without tops strolling around as if it were completely typical. No 6-year-old should possess those types of recollections. I keep in mind that topless ladies are I can recall 2 key elements, thus where did a 6-year-old end up? In the midst of that circus, it turns out that his Diddy's go-to dad was David Allen. Photographer. He was occupied with taking pictures. The Hamptons party animals. Maya, Justin's mother, was also present, and she claims that the evening began rather calmly and suitable for families till it wasn't. People were soon getting high. When things became suspicious, Justin's parents understood that they had to protect him from. They pushed him over to the lunacy, another area of the house where he can stay away from the mayhem, as even Diddy saw how out of control things were becoming, so he imposed a 1-hour curfew on every child. Indeed, only 60 minutes of kid-friendly prior to the actual party returning to equipment. The children had about an hour to spare. Thus, make yourself especially cozy because the object becomes something that you all get. You older folks don't want to see. Maya outlined their desire to simply make certain Justin wouldn't attend the events that took place later in the evening. Reflecting on the past of Justin and his mother concur that such gatherings were unsuitable for children. People where girls were swimming, getting high. Young, attractive, topless girls who were not dressed, you know. We went to another section of the house to prevent him from revealed. However, let's return to Diana Ross briefly because, really, what mom looks at a wild, she thought. Everything goes to the celebration. Genuinely perplexing. Was she so engrossed in her own celebrity bubble, in which she simply was she heterosexual or didn't notice the problem? Up disregarding the truth of what was attending these parties, yes, she is Diana Ross is a legendary figure who is a true diva, but that does not excuse her from common her choice. To bring her child into that mess goes beyond being dubious. It's really unsettling, and now as more rumors and accusations continue to more names are being pulled from the surface. Diana Ross is formally involved in the drama and the mixture, and it seems that even Paddy Leal couldn't stay since he had had enough. Don't talk about it when Paddy begins. I do, but you know it's getting real. Was a constant bubbling sensation. Paddy Leal and I are under her, and I've never been one to hold back when speaking. Her thoughts she has been loud over the years. Regarding her strained connection with Diana Ross for decades, the two divas were at odds. There are rumors circulating around everything. From envy at work to outright despise Diana Ross. Oh, how he would enter and observe what we were wearing, and they would search for the identical attire, but we continued after others, but naturally, we only had that one. They had donned their gold attire. Already, it appeared that we were I intended to pimp them by duplicating them. Diana Ross may have been the one to slap her. Motown's golden girl, but she wasn't scandalous person behind the glitz, and there had always been long gowns there. Drama trail, and not only with admirers however, her own group members a reputation as a vicious diva. There was nothing novel about the people in the industry had been discussing it in whispers for decades, particularly in relation to her disagreement with Florence Ballard wasn't just any Supremes member. She was among the pioneers, but now was the twist. Despite Florence's Diana's ascent demonstrates her unquestionable skill. To become the Supreme Court's leader at an expense, and many people thought it came at the power dynamics of Florence's. It all ended with the alleged backstabbing. Ballard was forced out of the group that she assisted in creating, thus now with the party accusations coming up again, and Paddy Leal pointing out Ross's previous actions seemed as though the veil was at last being raised. The crucial query was the amount of pure brilliance was the foundation of Diana's legacy, and the extent to which it was simply brutal ambition in a gown with sequins. Music. Florence's extraordinary voice had captured the attention of Milton Jenkins, and he recommended that she start a sister organization. Florence leaped at the Prime's notion and promptly introduced her friend. Together with Diana Ross, Mary Wilson and Betty McClown finished the initial foursome, the four of them. In the spring of 1959 the girls gathered as the Pretties, with Florence taking charge of the group. The pre-met singer poured themselves into the grind, practicing non-stop to refine their harmonies and make them more stage presence. They frequently gave performances working at record hops for no-pay talent shows in school and any gig they could discover that the money was missing, but the experience was priceless. Yet undoubtedly, they started constructing a local. Even so, things weren't always easy. Sailing rehearsals are scheduled around family responsibilities were difficult, and after Betty McClown left, the lineup was altered. She was quickly replaced by the group Barbara Martin, maintaining the pace resolute in their pursuit of the Premets. Began looking for a record deal because of the relationship between Diana Ross and Smokey the Miracles. Robinson was able to have a chance to try out for Berry Gordy however, Gordy wasn't sold at Motown Records. He instructed them to return, at least not now, rather than after they graduated from high school. Disappointed, the girls took the reverse. They remained and created themselves as frequent visitors to Motown, doing everything they could in the background, hand claps, vocals, anything it took just to eventually participate in the scenario. They received a record contract with Lupin Records. However, their initial pair of songs, Tears of Pretty Baby and Sorrow, were unable to make any significant effect, but they continued. The dream was genuine, and the bustle was beginning. The process at this time Florence started to have personal. The summer of 1960 was a tumultuous time for her. Written by a local, Reggie Harding, basketball player, following a sock event hop, was altered by this horrible experience. Personality that makes her withdrawn and furious and erratic in her emotions. While she told Diana Ross and Mary Wilson regarding the attack, Florence mostly maintained the incident to herself without saying anything of it once more in public. Her pals observed the significant shift in her conduct, but she continued to pursue her musical career. It simply removed everything of her, that is, and Diane and I, first most importantly, had no idea what was happening. Because she didn't communicate with us for 2 weeks, which was strange because we were really close friends in 1961. Primettes eventually secured an agreement with Motown on the stipulation that Florence was the one who changed their name. The Supremes were chosen from a list of recommendations, but her bandmates weren't extremely happy with the selection at initially. The name persisted, and so did the team's perseverance, but despite what made them successful was the Motown machine. The Supremes did not arrive immediately. Struggled to establish themselves, putting out 8 unsuccessful singles. It became so horrible on the charts. Began phoning them around the label. The Supremes' no-hit, one of those early songs that buttered popcorn, included Florence as the principal vocalist, and in fact became a Midwest regional hit, but it has yet to gain widespread recognition. Next, things eventually began to change in 1963. When the Love Light Begins to Shine gave the Supremes their Look Through His Eyes. Initial experience of actual chart triumph. That song signaled a sea change, not only for except Diana Ross, who was now being forced increasingly into the prominence as the primary vocalist. Nevertheless, Florence was still a vital component of the group. Her voice continued to be powerful and she contributed her skills to a number of songs within this time frame, but by 1964, When Did Our Love Go quickly rose to the top of the group's picture on the Billboard Hot 100, and clearly, the sound had begun to revolve. That hit didn't only land around Diana. It launched the Supremes onto the map. Into complete stardom. In the years that followed, the Supremes released song after hit, dominating the charts. Hit Florence Diana between 1964 and 1967. Mary also recorded 10 additional #1 songs. Hits confirming their status as the main act of Motown. Despite the group's accomplishments, Florence started to feel sidelined. She was annoyed by the emphasis Motown placed on Diana Ross and felt that the dynamics of the group were shifting as Florence's discontent increased. She started to have trouble with despair that had an impact on her work. Missed recordings and performances sessions and her alcohol consumption resulted in disagreements with Wilson and Ross as Florence's actions grew more. Berry Gordy, the leader of Motown, was unpredictable. Choose to take her spot on stage alongside. In 1967, Marlene Barrow of the Andantes. Gordy formally took Florence's place with Cindy Burdong from the Blue, and Patti Leal's Cindy Bird Song of Bells was present, and they had been She Had cassettes for a full year. Because I was completely ignorant of its. Florence's last show with the Supremes were held on July 1, 1967. It was only a day after she turned 24. Was a tragic scene in which she was clearly pregnant and carried out while drunk, which was only verified for Berry Gordy that a breakup was necessary following the performance. He sent her back to Detroit, and shortly after Florence Ballard was formally fired from her departure from the group she had helped form from the Supreme Court signaled the beginning of an agonizing downward spiral. Despite the fact that she obtained a Motown's $160,000 settlement arrived including strings, one of the most harmful since it was a gag order that prohibited her from discussing her in public time spent with the group. She attempted to start a lone profession and even agreed to a contract with ABC Records, but without the appropriate administration of her spouse, Tommy Chapman, lacked the necessary industry expertise. Disintegrated rapidly. By 1969, Florence was broke down in despair and struggled. Given her improved health, she had acquired a substantial weight, and her mental health kept getting worse. Eventually, she lost her house and was forced to move in with family members and rely on food stamps and welfare to make ends meet, but Florence appeared to be exactly as taking back her life. Disaster befell and she died on February 21, 1976, from a heart attack. Assault brought on by a blood clot in a coronary artery. Over 5,000 individuals attended her funeral. Regarding Diana, when Ross showed up at the funeral, she was difficult in the end. Even when dying, Florence Ballard's prominence was eclipsed by the lady who had overshadowed her in life, and for many, that funeral moment was a sobering reminder of how celebrity and legacy distribution can be so unequal. I'm just really depressed. I hope that something that might have happened was taken to prevent it from happening, and that wasn't the sole way that Diana's Gladys Knight's actions raised eyebrows. Another legendary figure in music says she found Diana Ross intolerable because to her conceit and the manner in which she handled those in her immediate vicinity. In her autobiography regarding her beef, Gladys revealed the truth. Returning to their motto with Diana, Ross Knight revealed over the day's tour that Diana didn't particularly enjoy her singing. The vocalist of Midnight Train to Georgia shared that Berry Gordy, the Motown big shot, and Gladys Knight was invited by Diana, and the Pips will serve as the Supremes opener, but became tangled when Berry implied that Diana Gladys wasn't feeling it. We received a call. Mr. Gordy's statement, "Well, I hear the Supremes are ruining my act." Gladys said, "Well, Mr. Gordy, that's not what now, since we're focused on you, we're merely performing our." Gladys then claims that Berry handed her the show and the tour's Pips the boot. Suddenly, he responded, "Well, I guess you folks ought to just return home tomorrow." Consequently, we returned home. And that, did you remember the game's name? In response to the question of whether Diana Ross was cruel to her, Gladys retorted, "Well, I don't lie, I am aware that she wasn't particularly pleased with me." Let me state, sources are now asserting that Diana Ross might have gone to some of the now famous parties hosted by Diddy. No, there have been direct accusations made. Not yet against her, but simply connected to people are raising their eyebrows at those incidents and posing challenging queries around what actually took place behind the scenes, correct? There are now apparently more than 120 lawsuits in the claimed works against Diddy and others. More victims come out every day. The music business is undergoing a significant reckoning, and it's beginning to appear as though nobody is fully. The demise of untouchable Diddy has been swift and unattractive, but if legendary Diana Ross and other names begin to added to the mix, things might blow out. Become a scandal more significant than anyone anticipated. Time will reveal whether her name remains marginalized or turns into a title. Anyhow, there concludes this video. People, goodbye.